want to?
Yeah, sure.
Lamola. Ladies and gentlemen, may we please rise to welcome the President of the Republic of South Africa and the President of the Republic of Kenya. You may be seated. Your Excellencies, President Ramaphosa and President Ruto, ministers, senior government officials, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, you are welcome. Karibu sana. Your Excellencies, we will now commence with the official proceedings of the signing ceremony between the Republic of South Africa and the Republic of Kenya. Your Excellencies, 6 memorandum of understandings between the Republic of South Africa and the Republic of Kenya, respectively, will be signed today. Your Excellencies, and I have the honor to call upon the signatories of the first agreement to be signed, Minister Lamula and Minister. The agreement to be signed is a memorandum of understanding on facilitation of trade through cooperation in the areas of standardization, technical regularization, conformity assessment, accreditation, and metrology. Thank you, Ministers. You may now shake hands and exchange your agreements. Thank you, Ministers. You may return to your seats. Asante sana. Your Excellencies, the second agreement to be signed, I call upon Minister Krisi and Minister Joho to sign a memorandum of understanding in shipping and maritime cooperation. Ministers, protocol. Thank you, Ministers. We may now take the handshake opportunity and exchange your agreements. Your Excellencies, I have the honor to request Minister Lamula again and Minister Cheptumo to sign the Memorandum of Understanding in the promotion of partnership on gender equality and women empowerment. Ministers. Please exchange protocol. Thank you. Congratulations, Ministers. You may return to your seats. Thank you. Asante sana. Your Excellencies, the fourth agreement, I have the honor to request Minister Manamela and Minister Ogamba as the signatories to sign the Memorandum of Understanding on Cooperation in the fields of technical and vocational education and training. Ministers. Thank you and congratulations, Ministers. The handshake, thank you. Thank you, Ministers. You may return to your seats. Exchange of the agreements, yes. Thank you. Thank you. Congratulations, Ministers. Protocol. Your Excellencies, the fifth agreement, I now have the honor to request Minister Nyonso and Minister Cheptumu again as signatories to sign the Memorandum of Understanding in the fields of arts, culture and heritage. Ministers. Protocol exchange the agreements. Thank you and congratulations, Ministers. You may have the handshake and exchange of your agreements. Thank you, Ministers. Your Excellencies, I respectfully ask Minister Nyonso to remain again as a signatory to the last agreement with Minister Joko. And this is the agreement, Memorandum of Understanding in the field of sports and recreation. Ministers. Thank you and congratulations, Ministers. You may exchange and the handshake. Thank you. Your Excellencies, we have now come to the end of the signing ceremony. I would like to thank His Excellency President Ramaphosa and President Ruto for witnessing the signing ceremony. Your Excellencies, Mungu awabariki. God bless us all. In conclusion, I now take the opportunity to call on the presidential spokesperson to facilitate the media briefing. I thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, Your Excellencies, Ministers, ladies and gentlemen of the media. We will now kick off with the media briefing, starting with President Ramaphosa delivering his remarks. In turn, he will invite President Ruto to also deliver his remarks. Thereafter, we'll open the floor to questions with those that we've discussed beforehand. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is it on? I don't have to switch it on, right? Okay. Thank you, Mr. Ngwenya. Your Excellency, President William Ruto, President of the Republic of Kenya, and ministers from Kenya and South Africa, ambassadors and high commissioners who are here present, and members of the media, and senior officials in both our two governments. This morning we were privileged to warmly welcome His Excellency President Ruto and Mrs. Rachel Ruto, together with my wife, who have accompanied, or who are accompanied by the delegation from Kenya. Our countries enjoy long-standing ties of friendship, solidarity, and cooperation over many years. These ties are rooted in our shared history, our common aspirations for African development, and our mutual commitment to peace, democracy, regional integration, and multilateralism. Kenya remains one of South Africa's most important strategic partners in East Africa and on the continent more broadly. We have just concluded our official engagements, which included a one-on-one meeting and our official talks, whilst the two First Ladies have also had an opportunity to engage with a number of key role development. They visited a center like that in Mamelodi and will be reporting back to us on their experience this morning. Later today, we will address the Kenya-South Africa Business Forum. The Memorandum of Understanding that have just been signed, as we all witnessed, provide a legal framework to further expand our cooperation, a cooperation that continues to deepen each time our officials and our ministers engage with each other. During our negotiations and exchanges, we extensively reflected on our bilateral relations. We have expressed satisfaction at the current state of our relations, which is coordinated through the Joint Commission for Cooperation at the level of our two foreign ministers. Our economic partnership is one of the most strategic pillars of our bilateral cooperation. Kenya remains South Africa's largest trading partner in East Africa, and it is also an important destination for South African investment on the continent. Leading South African companies have made significant investments in Kenya in sectors such as pharmaceutical services, retail and financial services, information and telecommunications, manufacturing, business services, and infrastructure development. South Africa's development finance institutions, such as the Development Bank of Southern Africa, alongside private financial institutions, are increasingly expanding their footprint in Kenya, particularly in renewable energy, infrastructure, and private sector development. We equally welcome the growing participation of Kenyan businesses in the South African market and the strengthening of commercial linkages between East and Southern Africa. But as South Africa, we want to see more Kenyan businesses investing in our market, and we want to see more Kenyan goods being on the shelves of our country, our shops in South Africa. The African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement provides a very unique opportunity for our two countries to further increase trade relations. In January 2024, I was pleased to witness the first shipment of exports from South Africa to Kenya under the African Continental Free Trade Area Preferential Agreement. President Ruto and I agreed that the Africa Continental Free Trade Area must serve as a catalyst for inclusive growth, industrialization, and job creation for our peoples. It should facilitate development of regional value chains and support African manufacturing and create greater opportunities, particularly for young people, for women, and for entrepreneurs across our continent. Our economic relations are coordinated through the South Africa-Kenya Joint Trade Committee, which met last month. The Joint Trade Committee reaffirmed the importance of promoting a more balanced and a mutually beneficial economic partnership through increased investment, industrial cooperation, skills transfer, technology exchange, and support the value addition and manufacturing in both economies. South Africa is keen to continue exploring opportunities for cooperation in infrastructure development, in logistics, in transport, in energy and related sectors. And South Africa appreciates Kenya's key role as a gateway to East Africa and as one of the leading voices on matters of peace, security and development on the continent. We reaffirmed our shared commitment to strengthening the African Union and its institutions and ensuring that Africa speaks with one voice in addressing continental and global challenges. And in this regard, we appreciated and thanked the important role that President Ruto is playing to strengthen the African Union through the various reforms that must be concluded to make the African Union stronger and to make it much more effective. As vibrant democracy with deep constitutional traditions, South Africa and Kenya remain committed to the principles of good governance, of accountability, inclusive development, and the respect of the rule of law. In this regard, I conveyed my best wishes to President Ruto and the people of Kenya as they continue for the country's preparations towards the 2027 elections. I also wish to extend my heartfelt congratulations to you, Your Excellency, and the Republic of Kenya for being among the 3 nations chosen to host the Africa Cup of Nations next year, alongside Uganda and Tanzania. This is truly a proud and historic moment for East Africa. This state visit has further strengthened the bonds of friendship and cooperation between our two countries. It has, in my view, laid a much firmer foundation for deeper collaboration in trade, in investment, in industrialization, and infrastructure development, skills development, and the regional integration that we so yearn to see. Together, South Africa and Kenya will continue to work to advance the prosperity of our peoples and contribute to the realization of the African Union's Agenda 2063 vision and an integrated, peaceful, and prosperous continent. So we thank you once again, President Ruto, for having taken time out of your busy schedule to come to South Africa for a state visit, which we hope you are enjoying immensely, particularly our hospitality. Our hospitality is second to none, as you well know, as yours is also second to none. So thank you for coming to the most beautiful country on the African continent. Together with Kenya, there are no other two countries that are as beautiful as our two countries. So thank you for being here. Thank you.
Your Excellency, President Cyril Ramaphosa, President of South Africa, distinguished senior officials present here, members of the press. It is a profound honor to stand here today in South Africa, a land that has given the world enduring lessons in courage, sacrifice, and the indomitable power of human spirit. South Africa is living proof of what becomes possible when people refuse to be defined by injustice and instead choose to be defined by their greatest aspirations. The world watched in awe as this nation dismantled apartheid and built something more lasting in its place. A constitutional democracy grounded in dignity, human rights, and in the equal worth of every person. I thank you, Mr. President, and the people of South Africa for the warm welcome and generous hospitality extended to me and my delegation. It speaks to the character of a nation that has always understood the spirit and meaning of Ubuntu. This state visit is both a celebration of how far we have come and a frank conversation about how much further we must go and how much faster we must move. In that spirit, President Ramaphosa and I held bilateral talks early this morning, reviewing the state of our relations and agreeing on concrete measures to deepen and further our cooperation. We met at a moment when the world order is shifting, when what was once certain is now in doubt, when multilateral institutions are being questioned, and when Africa's role is shaping global outcomes has never been more consequential or more contested. This is precisely the moment that demands African unity, African clarity, and African solidarity. I commend President Ramaphosa for South Africa's outstanding leadership during the G20 presidency from December 2024 to November 2025. Mr. President, you used that platform to do exactly what was required: to center Africa's development priorities, to press for reforms of the international financial architecture, international financial governance, and to ensure that the Global South was given the weight it deserves. Today, Kenya and South Africa stand together in advocating a reimagined global order, one built not without Africa, but with Africa fully represented, fully engaged, and at the center of it. We are not asking to be admitted to someone else's architecture. We are asserting our rightful place among the architects of the new global order. Our two nations have never been strangers to each other's struggles. Long before our High Commissions opened in 1994, the year of South Africa's democratic rebirth, we were bound by the shared experience of colonialism, by the solidarity of our liberation movements, and by the common dream of an Africa that governs itself, feeds itself, and speaks for itself. Over 3 decades, we have built one of the most impactful partnerships on the continent, grounded in mutual respect, shared values, and a common vision for the prosperity of our people. That partnership was institutionalized through the Joint Commission for Cooperation in 2007, and today we have directed that the second session of the JCC convenes as scheduled following this visit. We further welcome the ongoing work to elevate the Commission into a strategic partnership framework, a stronger, more comprehensive for the years to come. As a statement to our growing ties, we have today witnessed the signing of 6 instruments on trade facilitation through cooperation in standards, regulation, and metrology, on shipping and maritime cooperation, and on partnerships in gender equality and women's empowerment, technical and vocational education, arts and heritage, and sports and recreation. On trade and investment, we noted with satisfaction the upward trajectory of our bilateral trade, which grew from US $590 million in 2024 to $650 million in 2025, an increase of $60 million or more than 10% in a single year. This momentum must not only be sustained, but we must also accelerate. We acknowledge that real obstacles still remain, including tariff and non-tariff barriers, limited market access, and regulatory constraints. We therefore directed our trade ministers to dismantle these barriers by fully implementing the directives of the 7th Joint Technical Committee and Trade Committee. We further agreed to harness the Tripartite Alliance and the Africa Continental Free Trade Area to expand access, reduce costs, and unlock the full promise of intra-African trade. Ladies and gentlemen, we took stock too of robust investment flows over the past 5 years, with enterprises from both countries now present across banking, telecommunication, fintech, logistics, education, aviation, and retail. This reflects the natural complementarity of our economies and the confidence of our private sectors. We welcomed the proposed Kenya-South Africa Kenya-South Africa Business Council and commended the business forum convened alongside this visit, which turns commitment into commerce. We affirmed health, aviation, and education as strategic pillars of our shared development and are sectors that improve the well-being of our citizens, connects our people, and builds the human capital that will shape our continent's future. We commended the visa-free regime in place since 2023, which has measurably boosted tourism, trade, and cultural exchange between our 2 countries, and committed to resolving the outstanding challenges that remain. We were briefed in the earlier meeting that in 2025 alone, 58,000 arrivals were recorded from Kenya, signaling very robust engagement between our 2 countries. Today, during our bilateral discussions, the Ministry of Tourism of South Africa informed us that Kenyans visiting South Africa have increased by 18.7% since the introduction of the 90-day visa-free entry policy. This stands as a compelling evidence that when managed effectively, the movement of people across borders can create shared prosperity, strengthen ties between nations, and deliver tangible benefits for all. On peace and security, we reaffirmed that stability is the foundation of all development. We pledged sustained cooperation with the African Union, the United Nations, and other multilateral organizations united in the conviction that lasting peace is both a shared responsibility and a shared reward. As two of Africa's most influential voices, South Africa and Kenya are determined that our continent should shape global outcomes and not merely respond to them. Let me close with a standard against which I believe we must measure everything done in our meetings. That outcomes and impact will shape every commitment that we have signed and every MOU that has been signed here today. That is the standard, and I believe Kenya and South Africa, working together in honesty and determination, are fully capable of meeting. Thank you, Your Excellency, Mr. President. I look forward to elevating our partnership to even greater heights for the mutual benefit of our two nations and our two peoples. I thank you.
We will now open the floor to questions. I'm going to take first two questions, Tando, and take Zeneki from Newsroom. Please introduce yourself and the news outlet you represent. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Tando Maego, and I'm from the Business Day here in South Africa. To both presidents, my questions to both of you is, at a time of growing geopolitical fragmentation and competition between major powers, how can South Africa and Kenya position themselves as influential African middle powers rather than simply arenas for global rivalry? And my question to President Cyril Ramaphosa is that there has been discussions around sending diplomatic envoys to neighboring countries on migration and regional stability. Is South Africa considering a more formal diplomatic initiative with states in the region to manage migration flows and ease the current tensions?
Thank you very much. Zenibo, please pass the mic to Zenibo.
Zeneko Mhlaba from Newsroom Africa. My question to both excellencies is more like a follow-up to my colleague's question. Considering the current geopolitics that are taking place, how important is solidifying African voice through the two regional powerhouses, considering that Kenya and South Africa enjoy different geopolitics in terms of relations, South Africa leaning more towards Asia, and I would say President Ruto leading towards more of the American stance. Going forward, especially towards the G7 summit, which you'll be attending, how important is finding a common ground, but also championing a common agenda of the African continent towards that G7? Yeah, I think that's about it for now.
Thank you very much. Your Excellencies will take those first two, starting with President Ramaphosa. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Magwenya. Answer to the first question by Tando. As President Ruto said, the two countries, Kenya and South Africa, obviously do not want to overplay our status and importance vis-a-vis the African continent. All countries on our continent are equal. But of course, our two countries do have elevated voice and are able to bring about influence that is quite often able to shape things and to move things not only on our continent, but also at a global level. We are not rivals. South Africa and Kenya never see ourselves as rivals. We are complementary, and we have our own special strategic relationship that speaks to friendship, that speaks to respect, and that speaks to equality between our two nations. And we always find that we are so well aligned on many issues, both in dealing with national issues as well as in dealing with continental matters and global matters as well. And in doing so, we've always sought to deepen each other's cooperation between ourselves in the way we collaborate as we deal with matters at the AU, for instance, but also as well as we deal with matters between our two regions, East Africa and SADC. And when there were problems, for instance, in the DRC, it was the two regions, the two countries that fostered the whole quest for peace and the resolution of the conflict in the DRC. I found that working together at close range like that between South Africa and Kenya, we were able to see eye to eye on a number of issues. Kenya is playing a very important role in seeking to resolve the challenges that the Sudan is facing. South Africa plays an important role in seeking to resolve the challenges in South Sudan. So our work is based on cooperation. We cooperate well together, and we are able to come up with initiatives that are aligned, that are aimed at resolving problems on a peaceful basis, and that are aimed at advancing the interests not only of our two countries, but also of other countries, sister countries on our continent. In relation to the migration issue that South Africa is having to address at the moment, yes, we are considering a number of initiatives. And at the diplomatic level, we are talking to a number of sister countries on our continent with a view of getting more understanding, but beyond understanding the challenges that we face of getting various countries to work with us. Africa should develop a much stronger method of helping each other to resolve problems, continental problems and national problems. And we have found joy in being able to talk at a deep level with various leaders, including this morning with President Ruto, when we shared some thoughts and ideas on how best this challenge can be resolved. Yes, there will be envoys. Yes, there will be people that we will send around, not only on the continent, but also around the world. What we seek to do is to get the issue of migration so broadly and properly addressed, and where we should get as many key role players, countries, leaders in countries to work together to address the challenge of migration. South Africa is not the only country that is facing the challenge of migration, and we want to learn from how others have dealt with it and how they've dealt with the intricate problems that we are dealing with. South Africa has become an oasis an oasis of people who want to come here for a whole number of reasons. We need to be working with all other sister countries to see how best this challenge is resolved in the interests not only of South Africans, but in the interests of various other countries too, as well on our continent. Was that only for the first question?
Yes, sir.
So I should leave the second question for later.
That's also okay. Or
Okay.
tackle it.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think I will take both questions because they somehow are related.
I would do the same.
And the point that is being made is, are we spectators in this whole unfolding scenario, the geopolitical space? Is Africa, is Kenya, is South Africa, are we just spectators? Or are we making a contribution, or is our voice and our actions part of this whole equation? And let me say this maybe in two parts. Number one, it is our very considered view, working as people from the African continent, that for a very long time, you know, our voice, our ideas, our proposals did not find its way to the forum or fora that then would influence global discourse. That has changed. I think we have taken very firm positions. We have put forward very clear proposals on what we think, not just as Kenya and South Africa, but also as a continent. And by so doing, we are slowly beginning to influence global discourse. I say this, and I will give you 2 or 3 examples. The matter of the reform of the international financial architecture was very remote. Many people did not believe that there was a problem on how the Bretton Woods institutions, how access to affordable financing, how countries were treated in terms of credit rating, and how that significantly undermined Africa's development. As a result of what we have done as leaders in this continent, today there is greater appreciation that there is something fundamentally wrong with the global architecture as it stands. And today, in every forum, there is an admission that there is need for reform of both global governance and the global financial architecture. To the extent that now we have an African credit rating agency to bring into the equation an African perspective on what is the real position, what is the real risk assessment of African economies. Is there real risk, or is it perceived risk that is exaggerated and used to undermine the position of African emerging economies to access affordable credit? There is a realization by the global financial architecture that they need to redesign their engagement with the African continent. And we are seeing changes in how the World Bank operates, how IMF operates, how other DFIs are operating, and there is greater appreciation. So we are not just bystanders. We're not just spectators. We are influencing what is happening globally. Let me take it a little bit further. Today, Africa is represented at the G20. It is a reform that has been undertaken because of the push from those of us from this side of the world. And South Africa became the first African country to host the G20. And I have said here that we commend South Africa and President Ramaphosa specifically for taking the stage and positioning Africa rightfully and our priorities and our concerns and what we believe the world should look at going forward. It is on the same spirit that I will be picking up from where President Ramaphosa left at the G20. And I will be taking the same message, the same priorities, our perspectives to the G7 next month. This month, actually, this month. And it is because it is no longer possible to ignore a continent as big as ours, with 1.5 billion people, with the largest reserves of resources, whether energy resources, natural resources, human capital. In fact, by 2050, a quarter of the world's population will be living here. Africa will be the single largest market by 2050. Anybody who is serious about thinking about the future, it's not possible to figure out that future without this continent. And finally, we are not only looking at what we can do with others, we are also looking at what we can do ourselves. And that is why we are undertaking the reform of the Africa Union. We believe that the Africa Union must be made fit for purpose so that it can serve the 1.5 billion people in this continent much more effectively. It is the reason why I was assigned by my colleagues the responsibility to work on the reform of the organs and institutions of the Africa Union. It is one of the topics that I discussed with President Ramaphosa, especially on matters to do with financing the Africa Union. They say, he who pays the piper calls the tune. Whoever is paying will have a say, and we want to be the ones to determine the course of the Africa Union, the way to the future for our continent, by making sure that we mobilize resources to reform our union, to make it effective, and to make it fit for purpose. And we are looking even further. At the meeting we had in Nairobi of the Africa Forward, we are looking at how do we mobilize resources that are available in our continent. How do we better deploy those resources? For example, discussing with African DFIs, there is $4 trillion in our continent. $4 trillion US in our continent, in our pension funds, in our insurance companies, many pension funds in South Africa specifically, Kenya, our insurance companies, some of the biggest are in this country. We have a lot of resources. But these resources are not being used. They are not being mobilized for the development of our continent. Instead, they go to other places, and then we go borrowing this money from those other places. What we are saying is that we need our DFIs in the continent to mobilize these resources and make it available, make these resources available for the development of our continent, so that we build structures that will make it possible for us to deploy pension fund resources, insurance fund resources in driving public infrastructure development. And so we are not only looking at what we can do with others and how we cannot be, bystanders or spectators in the global stage, but we are also looking at what we can do as a continent. And it goes down to what we can do as South Africa and as Kenya. Part of the conversation we will be having with the private sector, for example, later today, is how the private sector in South Africa can look at opportunities for investment in Kenya. We want to generate 10,000 megawatts of energy. This is commercially viable. How do you mobilize resources in South Africa to invest? We are working on 28,000 kilometers of road, extending the standard gauge railway, building a new airport. These are opportunities for investment by African companies using resources from African DFIs, financial institutions, banks, pension funds, insurance companies. So we will be discussing the mechanisms that we can use African resources to drive African development. And finally, we've been having challenges, as we all know, of fuel caused by some war in Iran, which we have no control over. I saw yesterday in the news there was an escalation of some sort, and that creates difficulties for us here. And that's why we discussed last year with President Museveni and colleagues in the East African community. And we have decided that we're going to invest in an East African refinery so that we can guarantee our own fuel requirements. And we will continue to look at how do we create more resilience within, even as we build partnerships with others. And this is how we are re-engineering our positioning, so that, to use your words, we don't just become an arena for others to do whatever they are doing, but we also not just influence, but we also make this space a space for our own growth and our own development. I don't know whether, it's long since I was in school, so I don't know whether I answered the question well.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency. With those comprehensive responses, and in the interest of time, I'm going to take one last question from Kaya. Please keep it brief, Kaya.
Kaya Kumalo here from SABC News. President Ruto, this is just directed to you. A very turbulent time in East Africa in light of the outbreak of Ebola. And obviously, we've seen quite a number of reports coming out from Kenya with this establishment of the quarantine facility for the US citizens. I mean, obviously, the backlash that we've seen from Kenya, just your immediate reaction in light of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Kaya. President Ruto will take that question, and President Ramaphosa will close off with the second question from earlier on. Thank you, Your Excellency.
Ebola is a pandemic that is not confined to one place. And just for context, there has not been a single reported incident of Ebola in Kenya, just for context.
Yes.
So the big debate is going on, but that is the correct position. Absolutely. Number two, the Ebola situation in Eastern DRC is a source of concern for any country, including Kenya, that is mindful of matters health of its citizens. And the responsible thing to do when there is reports of such high-level infectious outbreak in a region where we have thousands of citizens, Kenyan citizens in DRC. We have soldiers in DRC. The most responsible thing to do is to prepare for any eventuality. And that is what Kenya has done. We have prepared ourselves adequately. We have taken command of all our entry points. We are doing testing of every person coming into Kenya from anywhere near that region. We are testing close to between 2,000 and 3,000 people from all our entry points every day. We have mobilized resources, testing kits, reagents, and all manner of people. We have trained thousands of staff, health staff, to be able to handle that situation. We have now isolation facilities, 23 of them across the country, in different parts of the country. And one of the facilities that has now raised a bit of controversy is the facility we agreed to set up in conjunction with the Americans in one of our military air bases. And why have we done that? We have a huge American military contingent in Kenya, number one. Number two, we have set up the 23 other isolation places in Kenya with the support of friends, among them the Americans, our own resources, but also with the support of Americans. The American government has supported us in this Ebola setup infrastructure, health infrastructure, to the tune of 1.8 billion Kenya shillings. And they did make a request to us to, in the process of setting up all the other facilities, to also set up one where they can use in the event that their citizens, their soldiers, some of them in Kenya or from elsewhere, if they are in a situation, then they can use that facility. For context again, even if the Americans had not set up that facility at the military base, if there was any American in Kenya, we would take them to a Kenyan facility. We would not throw them out, because the Constitution of Kenya tells us that we are responsible for the health of the citizens of Kenya, including those who are in Kenya at any one time. So what you see as a debate in Kenya is lack of information. You know, people who may not have enough information to understand what we are doing. If we don't prepare and a situation occurs, we would have to answer much more difficult questions than the ones we are answering now. The questions we are answering now are simpler. They are easier. But if we were answering questions when people are sick and we haven't prepared enough, then we would be answering much more difficult questions. Where were you? What were you doing? What did you do? You knew there was a pandemic. You didn't do nothing. You know? What we are answering, the questions we are answering now is that we are prepared too much. And we are prepared for even our friends. And you see, I ask the people of my great country that the American people and government have been partners with us on matters health for close to 25, 30 years. PEPFAR and all the other funds. American resources, American taxpayers' resources have been used to support Kenyan health infrastructure. It would be most unfortunate if on one request by the Americans to set up a facility at their cost, we would refuse. We would look very inhuman, you know? So the debate here is not about whether to set it up or not. The debate is, are we doing the right thing? Are we not? And I can tell you without fear of any contradiction, and I can look at everybody in the eye, Kenyan, including yourself, and tell you we are doing the right thing.
Thank you. Mr. President?
Well, thank you very much. Let me just comment on this whole initiative on Ebola. And Ebola, clearly, as President Ruto has said, it's a pandemic. It's a pandemic that should concern all of us on the African continent. And as South Africa's role is the champion for the prevention of these pandemics, we have been quite deeply involved in the process of dealing with Ebola on our continent. But as South Africa itself, we've decided that we will be very proactive and be Pan-African and support the efforts that the African continent should make to deal with Ebola. We've made a contribution, as you might well have heard, of $5 million to the AU CDC to strengthen the CDC's effort to ensure that we have all the resources to be able to fight and to deal with Ebola. And for us to do so is to protect the peoples of Africa, but so also that when we protect South Africa and make sure that we do not in any shape or form ever have Ebola, we're protecting the whole continent as well. And so this contribution is meant to strengthen health systems in the DRC, in Uganda, as well as the AU CDC will be making that type of initiative because our health systems on the continent do need to be not only strengthened, but there needs to be readiness to deal with pandemics like this. And in this regard, we call on all other countries and institutions that are able to lend a hand to make a contribution to enable the AU CDC to be able to deal with this challenge quite effectively. With regard to the earlier question, as I understood it, raised by Zinyiko, where he tended, thank you, Excellency, tended to say that South Africa will be more aligned with countries in the East and Kenya with countries in the West. There's just no truth in that. I mean, we never see our relationships as the two countries, and we are aligned on a number of issues, as exclusive to one country or to one part of the world. Our foreign policy is conducted in a way, and certainly South Africa's foreign policy is conducted in a way that is aimed at promoting and progressing the interests of the people of South Africa. But we are very strong also on saying it should promote the interests of the people on our continent. South Africa, as Kenya does, always make it a point that where we represent either South Africa, anywhere in the world, at a forum or otherwise, we always speak about Africa first and possibly last about South Africa. Because it's important for us to be promoting the interests of our continent. When we hosted the G20 here, our primary focus was our continent. We focus on what needs to be done for our continent and less so about ourselves as South Africa. When President Ruto goes to the G7 in France, he will be articulating the interests of Africa. He will be articulating what Africa needs and where Africa wants to go. He'll be speaking to the vision that is set out in Agenda 2063 for the whole continent. And of course, there are moments when bilateral meetings will be held, when he will speak about Kenya. But our primary focus as leaders, and certainly in my case and President Ruto's case, is to uphold and promote the interests of our continent. So, and we never see a contradiction in who is given the space, the platform, and the opportunity to attend whatever forum. It was South Africa that, as this only member, African member of the G20, that advocated very, very strongly, aided and abetted by our continent, of course, that the AU should be represented in the G20. We've achieved that. We will seek to achieve much more as we go on. We want our continent to be represented in the UN security structure. And we want, as President Ruto said, the global financial institutions to also be responsive to our call that those institutions should be more representative, which they are not. And that message is sinking in, and it is sinking in through the influence that countries such as Kenya, South Africa, and many others on our continent are bringing to bear to these global arguments. And correctly so, we have chosen not to be spectators. And we have also chosen not to be quiet. So we are noisy Africans. And we will always be noisy, very, very noisy on African issues on the global stage. You will listen to him when he speaks at the G7. His voice will even be more elevated, better than today, because we are going to be very noisy when we get there. Thank you very much.
Let me, Mr. President, just so that these people understand.
Yes.
South Africa and Kenya are neither looking east nor are we looking west. We are looking forward.
That's it.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Your Excellencies. On that forward note, we've come to the end of our media briefing. Thank you very much.